By watching couples, you can predict with 94% accuracy if they're going to stay together 6 years down the road or if they're going to break up. What signs are you seeing?
Well, we look for what we call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. The first one is criticism. And criticism means blaming a problem on a personality flaw of your partner. So things like, you're so lazy, you're so thoughtless, you're so inconsiderate, what's the matter with you, you never do something, or you always do something. Those are criticisms too, because they imply a personality flaw. Oftentimes, they have role modeled after their folks. So they have been criticized either by their caretakers or they've been bullied in school. And they've been criticized a lot by somebody. And so actually, what's really interesting, Lisa, is that inside their heads, they'll be even more critical against themselves than they are against their partner. So criticism is a big deal. But the one that's really destructive is contempt. And contempt is being critical from a place on high. I'm so superior. I'm going to correct your grammar while you tell me to fix the kitchen. You know, it's that kind of stuff. Oh, you wouldn't even think to get your hands wet doing the dishes, would you? You know, that kind of stuff. And contempt not only destroys a relationship, it also destroys the immune system of the person who's hearing the criticisms. So it's incredibly destructive. The amount of contempt in a 15-minute conversation predicts how many infectious illnesses that listener is going to have in the next 4 years.
Wow. Okay,
isn't that incredible?
We've got to go deep on this. This is so strong. And so I want people at home now to, how can they identify? So you've said a couple of things. What other ways does contempt show itself that you may not actually even realize is contempt? Because if people get in a relationship and they're already in certain habits, they may not realize they're both giving each other contempt. So what are those specific things, whether it's acts or words that people use, so we can start to identify? Because, God, if you're right about the illness thing, it's like, we've got to stop the contempt. Forget about saving relationships for now. It's just like saving lives. We've got to stop the contempt. And then obviously I assume that it would help relationships. But yeah, how do we start to identify that?
My colleague Paul Ekman identified a cross-cultural universal facial expression of contempt. And it involves the left lip corner being pulled to the side, usually accompanied by an eye roll. So that facial expression of contempt is very powerful also. So teenagers are great at it.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So if any of your wonderful participants have teenagers, they will recognize it immediately. Should we role play contempt?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, hi, honey. How are you doing today?
Yeah, you know, I've been thinking about your personality.
Yeah. What about my personality?
Well, you know how you're always needing the house to be so tidy.
Yeah, it's a mess. It needs to be tidy.
I think basically there's something wrong with your mind.
What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
I'm very calm when the house is a mess, and you get upset by it. So I have something to teach you about having a better mind. You know.
Oh my God.
And then you wouldn't be so upset about the house being a mess.
So are you the most arrogant idiot I've ever talked to in my life?
I'm just trying to help you.
You're trying to help me?
You know,
you know how you can help me? Clean up the kitchen.
Well, you know, that's superficial. I want to go deeper. And that involves changing your mind so that it's calmer and steadier.
Honey, you know how you can change my mind?
Wow.
Vacuum. I've heard, listen to this. This is really important. I've heard that men who vacuum get more sex.
Well, okay, that's a good argument.
See? There you go.
So to take me through exactly what you guys were doing. So obviously he was saying insults, but what was interesting is you were almost laughing.
Right.
But it kind of came across like almost like, ha ha ha. Yes, that's what you think.
I'm going to get you, baby.
So that laugh wasn't genuine either.
Of course it wasn't. And I called him an idiot, right? So name calling is another form of contempt. But did you hear the superiority in him? Way up there. And he stayed superior.
As in, let me teach you, let me show you.
Teach you. I'm so brilliant.
Let me
I know so much.
mansplain this thing to you, because you're not smart enough to get it, And I'm acting really calm and derogatory at the same time, and cloaking it in being helpful.
Ha 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 ha.
So now, how would you address it then? Because to your point, if contempt really does lead to illnesses, how do you address it in the moment so that it doesn't keep proceeding? Because I assume sweeping it under the rug and pretending that they weren't like that is going to be detrimental to your health.
Right.
Absolutely. So there's two ways to go. One is, what's the alternative to bringing up something with contempt, right? And the second is how to repair it once it's happened. Okay. So the alternative, darling, is to say, let's see, I would say, instead of being critical of him, I would say, sweetie, I'm feeling uncomfortable with how the kitchen looks right now, situation. I would love it if you would just help me clean up the kitchen. That's a positive need. So I feel some emotion about what situation, right? It's not about his character. It's about the situation. The kitchen is a mess. The positive need that I stated, would you please help me, is how he can shine for me. I'm not saying to him, stop doing that, don't do that, which is a negative need. I'm saying, no, I'm flipping it on its head. How can he do something that makes me feel better, right? And P.S., he makes the coffee every morning in real life. He empties the dishwasher every morning. He does a lot of the dinner cooking. So how can I complain? He's adorable. Look at him.
You guys are freaking adorable.
He's so great.
Well, and what Julie's suggesting is very different from what people call active listening. And the active listening formula is, when you do this, it makes me feel that. See, and I'm still pointing my finger at her and saying, she causes my feeling.
Right.
Whereas in the recipe of Softened Startup, I'm just talking about myself, or she's talking about herself. And it's much less likely you'll get a defensive response.
Because when you use the word you,
Right.
it becomes attacking.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just think about this. You. How are you going to feel? Right? You feel attacked.
And even the words you said earlier, like always and never.
Right.
I realize I do that to my husband. And I actually don't mean it. It's just in that moment where you're trying to almost defend your position, it's like you come as like, well, this is going to be this is me bringing weight to the argument. You always do this.
Yes.
How detrimental are those words in these types of discussions? And what words can we use instead?
Well, those are criticisms, right? So they imply a personality flaw. If you always do something, it implies a personality flaw. So what you can do instead, again, is say, I'm really upset. I'm furious that the kitchen, once again, is a huge mess. I really, really need you to please clean it up. Could you do that for me? The second thing, though, is also to avoid contempt, is to make a repair. So if John, here, let's go back into your contempt and I'll show you what that looks like. So go into your contempt.
So
and
I'm trying to help you really be calm in the face of messes in the house. So
I don't want to be calm.
Why not? I mean, being calm is healthy. Don't you want to be calm like me?
No, I don't. And in fact, I need to tell you that the stuff that you're saying right now is really hurting my feelings.
Oh, really?
I'm feeling put down. I'm feeling insulted. Can you say that another way? Can you say your own point of view another way?
Yeah. I don't want to be nagged about the house being a mess. I want to know what I can do and do it and then not hear about it again. That's really what I would like. I'm happy to help in the house, but...
You are?
Yeah. But,
yes.
But there's got to be a limit.
There has to be a limit.
Yeah.
Does the limit include vacuuming?
Sure. Yeah.
Good. Excellent. Okay. I'm happy.
Okay. All right.
There. So it's just saying what you feel in reaction to the contempt. So saying, I feel insulted, I feel put down, and my favorite is saying, I feel defensive. So instead of going defensive, which is the third horseman, we've got criticism, contempt, defensiveness. Instead of going defensive, I just say, I'm feeling defensive. Can you say that another way?
That's such a great line. It's so simple.
It's so simple, right.
I don't think in real time we actually realize sometimes we're being defensive until then it's escalated and then you maybe retract and you go, how did this all start? And maybe I had a bad day and that was why I showed up defensive. But I love being honest about it.
Right.
And in that type of situation, you need to almost have someone that I assume that it's you feel very safe around, because in saying I feel defensive, I feel disrespected, things like that.
Right.
You need, I assume, someone who can hear that versus someone that just defends back.
That's really true. So in order for a repair to work, Lisa, you're really putting your finger on it. The person with whom you're making the repair needs to accept the repair.
Right.
If they just bounce it back and just keep going on their same track, repair fails. And the conversation continues to get worse.
But it's true that it's hard to think of a repair when things aren't going well, which is why we have a repair checklist in the book. And you can post it on the refrigerator or, have it with you if you're going to have a serious conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to think of that stuff, in the middle of a conversation that's not going very well.
You guys highlighted about how you can actually see that when someone's shown contempt, how that spawns into their health and then the health issues.
Yeah, let me tell you about the research of Ron Glaser and Janice Kiko Glaser, who took small bits of blood from people as they talked about a conflict, newlyweds. And they measured our two stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And they were able to predict divorce 10 years later from those couples who were secreting a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. But the other thing is that Ron Glaser was an immunologist, so he used the blood to look at the immune system. And sure enough, if the four horsemen get used, then the immune system doesn't function as well in real time. And even in a half-hour conversation, it degrades its functioning. So the natural killer cells are not as effective at being cytotoxic. That's one of the ways that our immune system polices against tumors. And T cells don't proliferate as well against an antigen. So all of these things go wrong with the immune system, and they're able to document that. So we know the mechanism by which people get sick when there's a lot of the four horsemen around.
Yeah, that's insane. And then you also go a little deeper and you say that it actually leads to more men dying than women dying.
Right.
Was it women that can handle more cortisol and more stress? And so the four horsemen of the apocalypse isn't as toxic on a woman's body than it is a man's?
It's through evolution, because women have been, throughout the millennia, have been responsible for the survival of their infants. And the way they fed their infants is breastfeeding. What breastfeeding requires is the milk letdown response, where you've got milk in your breast, the milk can come out and be released so the infant can eat. Well, that takes being calm. You cannot be upset and have a milk letdown response. So over evolution, I think, I don't know if this is proven, but women have learned how to calm themselves down in order to help their infants survive.
And have an oxytocin release.
And an oxytocin
Which is
release,
what
sure.
lets the milk
Thanks.
down. Yeah.
But men, on the other hand, have been more the protectors protectors of the tribe, basically, let's say, protectors of the group. And so they have to stay vigilant. What does vigilance take? Well, one of the things it takes is adrenaline. So they hold on to those stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, longer in order to stay vigilant. And the thing that can happen, you see, here we come to our fourth horseman, is men will feel attacked when their partner is being really critical or contemptuous of them, or even defensive with them. They'll often feel attacked, and when they're attacked, they will go into fight or flight. When they're in fight or flight, blood is moving from the prefrontal cortex, where lots of problem solving happens, back into the motor cortex, where movement happens, action happens. And so they can't problem solve well. They can't interpret things. They can't listen well. They're in fight or flight, or freeze, as some people would say. As a result, it feels so uncomfortable to be sitting there in a conversation that they'll just shut down. And they'll become a stone wall. We call the fourth horseman stonewalling. And that fight or flight we call getting flooded. When your heartbeat goes above 100 beats a minute, you're in fight or flight. And so we saw that women can also get flooded, but about 85%?
85%.
Yeah, of the people in our lab who stonewalled were men. So they would stay vigilant, go inside themselves to self-soothe, because it feels awful to be sitting there in fight or flight.
But lesbians stonewall, so it's not entirely biology. It's not entirely
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
It's a self-soothing thing.
Thank you for breaking that down. I love freaking figuring out where things come from, and the idea that the behaviors that you guys are talking about can really impact and have a knock-on effect that you can predict down the line is so powerful. Then to think about how that impacts our health, then to think about how that actually impacts our longevity, and that if it impacts men more than it does women, it becomes this whole complex thing. But to understand it, I think is important, because once I understand it, now I can change it.
Well, another thing that's different between men and women is if you do a simple startle experiment in a laboratory, like a gun goes off behind somebody, women feel fear in that situation. Men want to get even when they're startled. So they're really thinking about retaliating. So aggression is much more likely for men than it is for women. So that different emotional reaction, which really comes, as Julie suggested, from being the protectors of the tribe, leads men to also have this liability of becoming more aggressive, more easily flooded. And that's a problem in relationships.
So why do men then stonewall more than women?
Because they get flooded more easily than women. That's one thing. And when they get flooded, they want to go inside, become a stone wall in order to self-soothe. That's number one. Number two, in terms of bringing up problems in a relationship, women tend to be, well, first of all, they bring up more of the problems in a relationship because they feel in some way like they're the guardian of the relationship. And secondly, they're often more critical when they bring up the problem. And the criticism that women may deliver towards a man when they have a problem they want to bring up will help the man, unfortunately, feel attacked. Then it doesn't work.
Well, Lisa, let me say something else. It's just that when Robert Levinson and I were doing this research, almost 50 years ago, we found there was another group of people, couples, who divorced later, an average of 16 years after the wedding, as opposed to the couples who had the four horsemen divorced around 6.2 years after the wedding. But these people who divorced later, wasn't that they had a lot of conflict, it was that they didn't have a lot of positive things going on between them. They had lost interest in one another. So that's another real disastrous kind of interaction, where people stop being interested in their partner, stop being curious about, who is this person I love, and what's she thinking right now at breakfast, and what's on her mind and heart, and they stop really caring.
And I heard you guys say that it's like a 5-to-1 ratio, that if you don't mind explaining the ratio and how that is a big determining factor into, couples separating.
So what we saw when couples were discussing a conflict, here's what we did. We added up the seconds in which the either partner said something or gestured something that was positive. For example, it was as simple as, that's interesting. Really? All of those were positive. Asking a question, being humorous, making a joke, smiling, all nodding your head, all of that, those were all positive responses. We then also calculated the number of seconds that negative things were done. Negative things meaning, the eye roll, it's ridiculous, scoffing, being defensive, any of the four horsemen, looking like they were stonewalling, etc., putting down their partner. And what we saw is that the successful couples, as we followed them and really saw what they did in that 15 minutes, had at least a ratio, the couples who were successful, of 5 positive things for every 1 negative thing. Isn't that amazing? So 5 times the amount of positivity as negativity. The couples who were not successful, who were like declining, had 0.8 positive things to 1. So almost a 1-to-1. There was still some positivity, but not nearly enough to overcome the power of the negative things that were being done or said.
So I read this in your book, and immediately this morning, my husband said something critical about me being messy or something. I can't remember what it was. And I turned to him and I was like, that's one critical thing. You now owe me 5 nice things, 5 positive things.
Good for you.
Yeah. But that's what I love.
Good job.
I'm so
Good job.
honest about the facts and stuff that you guys write about, and I think it brings things to light. So let's make sure that we do 5-to-1.
Well, and that's just during conflict. So in our apartment lab, when people are just hanging out, that ratio for the successful couples is 20-to-1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
It didn't even dawn on me that was specific to conflict versus non-conflict.
Yeah, and when you're just hanging out, there are these amazing moments that our camera operators noticed very quickly, which one person is trying to get their partner's interest or attention or have a conversation or tell a joke. And if the camera goes toward the other partner and sees the response, that moment is a critical moment in determining the future of that relationship, even when there's no conflict. So that the people who respond, it's been called the bird test. Like somebody looks out the window and says, oh, look at that bird. What a beautiful bird. And the camera turns toward the partner. The partner just keeps ignoring that. Yeah. That we call turning away, right? If they get irritable and say, would you stop interrupting me? I'm trying to read. That's turning against. Or if they just look out the window and go, that's turning toward. Well, 6 years later, after being in the lab, the couples who divorced, we look back 6 years earlier, had only turned toward those bids 33% of the time. The people who are still married, we look back 6 years earlier, they turned toward bids 86% of the time. So my student Jenny Driver discovered that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
incredible.
powerful. Does that almost go back to kind of the idea of feeling seen?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Feeling seen, feeling important, feeling valued, right? Feeling known also, but also just feeling loved. Just feeling loved. In other words, I know that John loves me, even if he's, reading the New York Times in the morning and he's like, oh my God, and it's the Science Times and he's really into it. But I say to him, honey, I got to talk to you about our calendar. He looks up and says, okay, what's up? That is turning towards. Just a simple little nut and bolt. But look at that difference as to how much difference it makes in the quality of the relationship. 86% of the time turning towards versus 33%. It's huge.
Wow, that's huge.
But that's what couples mostly argue about, is not finances, sex, money, in-laws. Mostly it's about these moments where people aren't there for their partner, and it feels like a real letdown. Really feels like you're not important. You can see people crumple a little bit when their partner turns away.
Right. You know what it reminds me of? You've heard of a sea anemone, right?
No.
Oh, you haven't? No. Okay. So it's this, you've probably seen pictures of it. It's a little creature, often in tide pools, and it has little fingers, little tiny fingers, whole circle of fingers like this. And it will slowly open up to be seen, to be vulnerable, to be known. Give it a poke, closes back down.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen it,
I have.
right?
Yeah.
And
they're like green, they look dangerous. They look,
and then it closes up.
Yes.
But the thing that's interesting is that if it's poked and it closes up, it's much less likely to open up again and be seen and be vulnerable, you see. So people are like that, the same thing. If we turn against our partner or away from our partner, when our partner has made a bid for connection, we close up, and we're much less likely to be open and vulnerable and close emotionally to our partner. So it makes a big difference.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love
Yeah.
that so much. So out of curiosity then, in the breakdown that you just gave, and thinking through people who have maybe been a few years in having conflict, or like, how do you forgive? How do you get over things? Betrayal, cheating is a big thing.
It's huge.
And I actually have a quote of yours. I'm just going to pull it up because it really hit me. An affair is usually a symptom of a dying marriage, not the cause. The end of that marriage could have been predicted long before either spouse strayed.
Right.
So,
Explain.
And, really, what research has shown is that affairs happen for all kinds of reasons, and there could be one-night stands and things like that. But in general, it's a product of loneliness. And it's a problem of not talking to your partner about what's bothering you. And avoiding conflict when you really need to talk about what you feel. So rather than my saying to Julie, since we had the baby, we just haven't had good times between us. It hasn't been much fun, just a lot of drudgery. Well, I don't want to do that because she's going to get mad at me. We're going to have a big fight. So I don't bring it up, and I sit with it until, I really feel that the marriage just isn't what it used to be. So I complain to somebody else about her rather than complaining to her about her, right? I'm avoiding conflict when I really need to talk about something. And that winds up leaving me alone and lonely. So I seek out the comfort I'm not getting in the relationship somewhere else, And there I give myself permission to cross boundaries because I think, if I bring it up with her, it's going to be a horrible fight. And who needs that? So there's that dynamic going on, right, that allows you to predict the eventual loneliness. And in every affair couple, there's been that avoidance of self-disclosure and avoidance of conflict that we have to rebuild.
Yep.
Once we rebuild trust, which has really gotten shattered by the affair.
And we have a specific model that we're now doing a big research study on, actually the first, what we call controlled study, where you have couples getting treatment for an affair, couples not getting treatment for an affair for at least a while. Yeah. And compare those two as to how the relationship proceeds or progresses or doesn't. So what we call it is the AAA model. Those A's stand for attune, attach. And what we've seen, first of all, is that the impact of an affair or betrayal creates PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Where the person who's been betrayed can't think straight, gets depressed, can't sleep well, is hyper-vigilant, looking for some signs in the partner that they're still cheating. Lots of big emotional swings and pictures in their mind, images, fantasizing what the partner looked like with the affair partner and feeling horrible about herself or himself. You know, it's really, really, really painful. So the first stage, atone, is one in which the betrayed partner can ask the person who had the affair any question they want, any question, with one exception. Don't ask about the kind of sex the person had, because if you ask that specifically, you're going to have even more images that traumatize you from fantasizing what your partner just described. So don't ask about that, but you can ask, how much did you spend on him? Did you give him gifts? Where did you meet him? This date and time, were you there with him, etc. So first, that then betrayed partner is asking all these questions. They're being answered transparently. The person who's been betrayed expresses their feelings about the affair, but without criticism and contempt.
Whew.
And
how do you do that?
That's with the therapist. You can't really recover from an affair without a therapist. So the therapist is giving them different words to use instead of saying, you horrible, terrible, rotten, no good jerk, is saying, I felt devastated. My whole world fell apart. I felt destroyed. Oh my God. My head was spinning. I felt like I was in outer space with no lifeline, etc. Describing those feelings, and the betrayer needs to listen to that and then express their apology and their remorse in the deepest way possible. They're not going defensive. They're not saying, well, if you'd been a better wife, this wouldn't have happened. No, they're not doing that at all. They're just saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And they have to say that 1,000,000 times. So that's the atonement phase. In the attunement phase, the next phase, marriage number 1 has burnt to the ground. You've got to rebuild marriage number 2. But it's marriage number 2 with the same partner. So we teach all the ways of rebuilding friendship, of rebuilding trust, of managing conflict, of how to have conflict, especially if they've been avoiding conflict, like John just, described. So they're working on creating what we call a sound relationship house, a good, solid structure with trust and commitment eventually, as they learn all the ways to have a better marriage, better relationship. And the last phase we call attachment. And attachment is really about recommitting to the relationship. Right. And in a lot of cases, that's where having sex again may enter in. May not happen until that stage where there's enough trust for the betrayed partner to make themselves vulnerable in physical intimacy again. So attachment is that last final commitment again.
Oh my God, that was, again, just so well put and broken down. If you do those stages and you do that work, do you end up, have you seen moments where people still can't forgive and they, over time, they just make each other's lives almost miserable because the person, I look, no judgment, I can completely understand. My husband cheated on me. I've already told him, I'm out the door. I won't even give you a second to explain. I find out, 10:01 that you've cheated, 10:02, my bags are packed, I'm out the door. So I've just told him that ahead of time.
Okay.
That's my deal breaker. That's for me. I don't put judgment on anyone else.
Sure.
But other people may try to make it work. But what ends up, I've noticed happening with certain people that I know, they just hold it against them. And so they say they forgive, they maybe do some work, not necessarily that amazing breakdown, but then over time, you see the resentment, you see the contempt, you see it in everything that they do, that they keep throwing it back in their face. In those moments of conflict, when you can maybe not use it as a weapon, they end up choosing to use it as a weapon. And now you regress, I assume, back into the shame and that kind of spiral again.
And that's why in evaluating whether this treatment works, we not only use questionnaires, we actually videotape them again, dealing with conflict, to see if the four horsemen were still there, and, what was going on, even 18 months after the therapy ended. And there's a big difference between atonement and forgiveness. In atonement, it's not enough to just be remorseful. You have to really face what you did, when you betrayed your partner, right? And you have to really come to some understanding of what that was, and you have to decide to be different. You have to really make a pledge to become a very different kind of person. And so atonement is very different from just saying, I forgive you. And just because I'm a good Christian, or I'm a good Muslim, or I'm a good Jew, or whatever, it's really, it really requires a lot of introspection and self-understanding on the part of the person who did the betrayal, way before we get to what was wrong with the relationship that might have led to the loneliness in the first place.
Right.
So atonement is really different than forgiveness.
So instead of forgive and forget, it should be atonement and accept?
Right. It really should be.
Yeah. I think that's really well said, Lisa, because we're all human beings. Human beings are flawed. None of us is perfect. None of us. We all have challenges within us, right? And many of those challenges can lead us to make huge mistakes. We're all human, right? And that's the acceptance. Can you accept the other person as a human being who made a really painful mistake? But one of the things that we've seen that unfortunately leads to so much failure in recovering from affairs is that many therapists or coaches or whoever have no idea of how to deal with an affair. They don't know how. They don't know it relates to PTSD. They don't know that you've got to do this atonement. You've got to talk about the affair. You've got to bring the emotions out of the other person before you ever work on the marriage. A lot of times a mistake is made to, okay, let's talk about what was wrong with the marriage that made this happen. Well, guess what? It's blaming the victim. It's blaming the victim. It's blaming the person who was betrayed, as well as the person who decided to have the affair. How fair is that? It's not. That's why you've got to deal with that atonement first, deeply. And a lot of therapists or coaches are scared to, because the emotions are so intense.
And in fact, our colleagues, Paul Peluso and Taylor Irvine, actually did research on what happens with 5,000 people who have had affairs. What proportion of them go to therapy at all? And it turns out that only about half of them do. And only 30% of the time when they go to therapy, did the therapist ever talk about the affair? Only 30%.
Wow.
70% of the time when they go to therapy, the therapist never even mentioned the affair or dealt with it. Only
Holy
30%. Cow. And that 30% didn't know how to approach it. They brought it up, but they didn't have any tools like, this AAA model for treating affairs. So they didn't know what to do. They were kind of lost They were at sea. The therapist was lost, right?
Do you know the percent of people that didn't go to therapy? How many people lasted and how many people didn't?
Most of those people broke up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
Sad.
unfortunately.
Most of those people broke up.
Because they felt hopeless. They felt hopeless. They thought there was no recovery. There was no way to get over this.
The deception is probably the worst thing about the affair, I think. You know, how can I trust you again? You lied to me systematically for so long. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you speak about how important trust is, obviously, in a relationship. And I think you say that there's 3 phases of love. Do you mind taking me through those phases?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting because when we studied newlyweds, just about all the fights that they had in the lab were basically about, can I trust you? Are you going to be there for me? You know, are you going to find me sexually attractive 20 years later? I mean, am I more important than your mother or your football team or your friends or, you know, whatever.
Or the
right?
TV.
Or the TV or what, you know, whatever it is that's important to you. Can I count on you? So that was the beginning. And the people who got through those issues were able to build trust. And that was the next phase of the relationship. But building commitment for a lot of couples didn't happen until they built something together that was meaningful, like have a child together or have a business together like you and your husband did, but did something, you know, that moved them toward the state of commitment where they were able to say, you know, you're the love of my life. There is not another person on the planet who can compare to you in my heart. And this is my journey, you know, and that's a very, very big step. And a lot of couples we see in therapy who are married and have children and a house together have not gone through trust and commitment, haven't built those two, because you have to build them, right? And then that third phase is after trust and commitment is built and you built the life together, then, you know, it just gets better and better over time.
And that third phase is, I think it's like loyalty, or it can be betrayal, going back to where
the initial phase we call limerence, you know, where it happens for a lot of couples, even in arranged marriages, it happens where you kind of fall in love. And that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling, you know, and it feels like something wonderful is about to happen every minute.
Magic.
That magical phase. But, you know, that phase only leads to the big question is, can I count on you, right? And can I count on you forever? That loyalty thing. So those are the 3 phases: limerence, trust, and then commitment.
Yeah. You mentioned kids. I'd love to talk about, I think there's a stat in your book where you say that people that have kids, within 3 years of having a child, 70% of couples are less happy and more hostile towards each other.
Yeah, that's a big shock, you know, because you think, you know, having a kid is a blissful experience. And it is in part, but it's also tough. I mean, you don't sleep, you know, a lot of times, you know, you're sleep deprived and, you know, and you haven't counted on your life changing so much and all the philosophical changes that come from becoming, you know, not just a child, but a parent. But what happened was that the couples who went through the transition to become parents smoothly were different, even a couple of months after their wedding.
Before they had the child.
Way before they had the child, they were really different. And that was pretty amazing that you could predict that whether having a child would be tough for this couple or not, you know. And there were some couples who went through pregnancy where, you know, guys were very important in this, where, you know, the partner said, you know, she's so beautiful. She just glows. I just, you know, can't keep my hands off her. You know, I keep listening to the baby's heartbeat, things like that, you know. And other people say, you know, she's fat as a whale. She can't ski anymore. You know, we're not able to do things that are fun anymore. It's just a drag, right? And those people were different, you know, years before. And so Julie and I looked at the ones who really went through the transition really successfully and the ones that didn't, and built this workshop. And in 10 hours of a workshop, 77% of couples didn't have that drop in relationship satisfaction. So almost 80% of couples went through in 10 hours preventing all of that, and really enjoying the baby better. And not only were the parents different, when they had the baby, but the baby was different. The baby didn't take the workshop, but
it did too, because they were pregnant.
Yeah, that's right. So that baby cried less, laughed more, was better able to self-soothe because the parents were different toward that baby once they went through our workshop, the Baby Makes 3 workshop.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of people say, I'm just going to be honest. I've heard some women, especially when I was younger, say, yeah, well, if we have a kid, then we'll get closer together. Then he'll love me more.
Right.
And I just haven't seen it play out. So I'm always wondering, why do people think that? And then why does it end up not being true?
Right. That's right.
Is it
It's
because they're
myth.
Yeah.
It's myth, right? So our culture, our society is full of myths about relationships, a million myths. And another one is if you have a baby, that's going to bring you closer. If you have baby number 5, that's going to make you even closer. It's like, what? I don't think so. Because think about this. You're losing incredible amounts of sleep. Typically, both people are. And if you have not just missed sleep, but disrupted sleep, as you would with a baby crying a few times a night and waking up, you have almost every sign of depression after 30 days. 30 days, right? That's a well-known research fact.
And women have to give up their own goals, their own personal goals.
Well, not
they didn't
always,
expect
but typically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Quite
yeah.
often, the changes are not what you expected at all. They're very different.
Okay, so those are the moments that almost in real time, you can almost feel that impact.
Yes.
What about the things that over time start to seep through? So in the book, you have a story about a couple buying a puppy. And the famous final words are, he'll come around.
Right. So in that story, it was so interesting. The theme of this story, before we go into it, is you got to go deeper in a conflict. You've got to go deeper. So let me explain. Couple was married. They didn't have any children. And the husband traveled all the time. So the woman really wanted to get a puppy to keep her company because she was lonely, and also maybe as a little protector. Kind of first warning if somebody she didn't know came to the door. Okay, so the husband said, absolutely not. I don't want a puppy. Forget it. No puppy. Then he went away on another trip. She thought to herself, he'll come around. She went out and she got a puppy. Uh-oh. When he came home, there was the puppy. He was really angry. He was upset. What ended up happening is that the puppy, of course, it's a little puppy, it's not housebroken. Where does it poop? Under his desk. He's saying, I don't want to take care of it. You got this puppy, you take care of it. She says, no, it's in your office, under your desk, you take care of it. Nobody took care of it. So when they divorced and sold the house, it finally got cleaned up. All right, now, here's the point about going deeper. We have an exercise and a way really to go deeper in the book that is gold. Here's what one person does with their partner. They ask their partner questions that are designed, we design them, to go much deeper and understand what is going on beneath that person's position on the issue. So for the wife, if you think about, okay, what's her value system? What are her beliefs? Well, she has a belief about a family, that a family includes children. Okay. What's her background? Well, she had a dog in childhood. She loved that dog. That dog was her companion. That dog grew up with her as a child, and it was wonderful. Okay. Why is it so important to her? Feelings. When we get to what is your ideal dream here? There's where the gold was. Ideal dream for her was, I really want to have children. And I saw bringing a puppy into the house and taking responsibility for caring for it and cherishing it as a practice run for having children. So there was her underlying dream. What was his, as we also got through the questions for him? I want to be free. I want to be independent. I don't want to be tied down. I want to travel. I don't want to. With you. Right. I love you. I want to have adventures with you. And we can't, I don't want to have children. I want to have that freedom to have adventures abroad with you. Well, look at the two dreams, you see. But were they talking about that? Mm-mm. Should we get a puppy or not? Without any insight into what was beneath that. So that exercise really helps couples to have major breakthroughs in gridlock conflicts, because they are taking time to understand each other's hearts, dreams, kind of existential point of view before creating a resolution or a compromise.
And they know what they're fighting about.
Right.
That's it, right? Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people fight and they don't know, why are they fighting so much?
They think they're fighting about the dog, but they're not really fighting about the dog.
Right.
That's
they're really
right.
fighting about those dreams.
That's right.
And so they're not compromising for good reason. It's not that they have some psychopathology. Right. It's that they have an underlying dream that underlies their position on the issue. And it's not always resolvable, because sometimes, one person wants children and the other person doesn't really strongly, and at least then they know why they're breaking up.
Right.
But a lot of times things that seem like they're unresolvable really are. You have an example of a couple where they seem to have a totally unresolvable issue.
Indeed.
Remember?
Would you like to hear that story?
Please, yeah, absolutely.
So this was from a workshop that we did. There was a couple there who were getting ready to retire. They both really wanted to sell their house. Okay, but his dream was to buy a sailboat and sail forever, ever into the sunset for the rest of retirement. Hers was to go live on a farm that had been in the family for over a century. And she wanted to take her place in the legacy of ancestors who had lived on that farm. Where was the farm located? Iowa. So how do you sail around the world from Iowa? This is not an easy thing to do, right? Not. Listen to this compromise. They first did the 6 questions. Each one would ask those 6 questions and just listen to the answers, not bring up their own position, till it was their turn to explain the answers to those same questions while the other person listened. So they did that first. Then, with compromise, we have a special method for that. We call it the bagel method, or, depending on your culture, the donut. The donut. Okay, so here's how it works. You can take either a piece of paper or do this in your mind, 2 concentric circles you think about, one little circle in the center and a big circle on the outside. In the center circle, think of what is so core to who you are, to your identity, that you cannot compromise on it. You can't give it up. Because if you did, it would be like giving up the bones of your body. You don't want to do that.
Is this like a characteristic or a dream?
No, it's either a dream or a core need.
Got it, okay.
Right? Okay. Or maybe a value, some kind of value, like, no corporal punishment for kids, something like that. Okay. So in the outside circle, you think of what you're more flexible about. And the flexible stuff includes when something will happen, where, who does it, how much will be spent, all those nitty-gritty details. So listen to what they came up with after they created what's inflexible, separated that out in their position from what's more flexible in this issue. So he, of course, put sailing down in the center. She put down live on the family farm in the center. Okay. In the outside, there was so much that was flexible. Whose dream goes first? When will it start? How much will we spend? Where will we go? How long will it last? All that stuff was flexible, which was like, oh, well, this is a whole new discussion. And then they decided they would buy a sailboat and sail as far as they could for 1 year. Then they would put the boat up on dry dock and go live on the farm for a year through all 4 seasons in Iowa. Not an easy thing to do. And then after 2 years, decide what to do next. And as you see, they figured out a compromise that honored each person's dream. So it was fair, it was equal,
Right.
and it felt wonderful for both of them.
That's such a beautiful story in the way that it kind of they navigated it, because
Right.
I mean, just going from my own experience, being a stay-at-home wife for 8 years, and I didn't want it. Every year I kept just saying, well, just 1 more year, just sacrifice 1 more year, just 1 more year, right? And that 1 year turned into 8. And I think so many people, especially women, end up sacrificing. They give over to the family for the sake of the kids, for the sake of the husband, for the sake of the fill in the blank. And then we blink and we realize, hang on, where did my life go? But what I love about this is you're being very concrete. You're both saying, doesn't mean that one is more important. We're going to treat these equally. But neither one of us has a right to dictate the path. It needs to, we come together and we come up with a plan together. It's so amazing. I love that.
You know, and things are not symmetrical these days either. So a man accepting influence from a woman is so powerful today. A man who knows his wife's dreams and honors them, that is so much more influential and powerful at making love last than a woman giving in to her husband's visions and dreams. Because nowadays, you know, a man who doesn't know his wife's dreams is really kind of lost. You know, he's not connected to her. Accepting influence is a really interesting thing, because if you don't accept influence, you wind up not being influential yourself. And that seems counterintuitive. It seems like if you're strong, you're immovable, you know, you don't accept influence. On the contrary, the only way to be powerful in a relationship is to accept influence. But given what's happening in today's world, where in many places in the world, women are being empowered and really recognizing that they could lead interesting, important lives that have meaning to them, it's so much more important in those places for a man to accept influence from a woman than the other way around. That's kind of what we're living through.
Right. One other point of that, if you think about a man who doesn't accept influence as being a great big boulder in the middle of a path that the woman is trying to walk down, and he's blocking that path, what is she going to do? She's going to go around the boulder and keep going. So not accepting influence just becomes a blockade for the woman that she can navigate around, which is a very sad thing, because it leaves the man behind, the woman ahead down the path, and they don't get to share all the ways that she's being enriched by continuing down that path.
I never thought about it like that, but that's so true. It's almost like you've got 2 options. If you're a bulldozer, as a woman, you've got 2 options. You actually stop and don't move forward, which is obviously not good for you in your life and your dreams and what you want in life. Or you go around it and now you're not aligned as a couple.
Right, exactly. Well said. Exactly.
So your husband supported your dreams?
Yes, it was one of these that we had to navigate though, because I was a stay-at-home wife and said I wanted 4 children. And then I realized I don't ever want to take, like, do the traditional work. I don't want to clean his clothes. I don't want to cook for him. And I actually don't want children. I want to build a business with him. And that was really hard to navigate. And so the first thing I did is give him grace that it's going to be a change and that it's not going to happen overnight and that we're doing the journey, we're doing the change together. It's not me going through the change and he has to accept it. I actually asked him to help me on the journey. And so giving him that, like you've obviously broke it down earlier, it was like, hey, I need the help.
Right.
I'm going through something hard.
Right.
I'm, navigating this. And then the other part was, what do you need from me, babe, as I go through this transition?
Right.
And so you're going to need time to grieve the wife I was. And I will help you work through that grief. So what if I wean you off me taking care of you? So I said, this week I'll cook and clean for you 7 days a week. Next week I'll do it 6. The week after I'll do it 5. And what we'll do is I'll slowly but surely do it. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I'm still going to take care of you because I feel good about doing that. And so he said, yeah, that sounds like a great plan. Now, of course, we had hiccups along the way.
Beautiful.
But it was the navigation of, he wasn't the bulldozer in the road. He almost was the carriage that was like, actually, let me help you, let me help carry you along this path.
Perfect.
And look at how sensitive you were, Lisa. So sensitive in realizing that, this is not just a rock in the middle of the path. This is a human being who loves his wife and is used to his wife playing a particular role. And yes, his wife is going to be changing. She's going to be a different human being. And I got to get used to that and begin to pick up some things she's been doing. And, kind of a bummer. You gave him time to deal with that, which was very caring and compassionate of you. So it's no wonder that he was willing to accept it because of the way you approached it.
Thank you. I mean, I give so much credit to you guys because I think I said
no,
earlier.
I could give you the credit.
Thank you. Well, the reason why is because, as I said, like me and my husband have been, in your world for a long time, and we've read your research and we've seen your stuff and we've heard the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So very early on in our relationship, we were using the principles that we're talking about today in order to be able to overcome these hurdles. Because a lot of people say, oh my God, you guys are so lucky. I'm like, it has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with addressing the hard things, going through the principles that we're teaching today and figuring out as we evolve to, like, how do we evolve together instead of evolving apart?
Right.
And neither of us are trying to hold each other back, but it is difficult. And so that's why I love how you're breaking it down, all these like little tactical tips that really do compound itself, I think, to where people end up feeling either completely lost to what you were saying about the gridlocking of conflict where no one can move forward and now people just feel helpless, to how do you get past that? What is actually holding you back?
Well, there's another thing that we discovered, and Susan Johnson did also, that sometimes there are things that have happened in the couple's past that some regrettable incident or some time when they really weren't, one person wasn't there for the other, that created what Sue Johnson calls an attachment injury. We call an emotional injury, that there needed to be a way to reconcile that emotional injury in the past. So we developed this aftermath of a regrettable incident form to be able to really heal those past emotional injuries. And people used to think, well, the past is gone. You can't do anything about the past. But you can, because it still lives in your body when it's there, when it's that injury. It's still alive. You don't forget it.
That's what I was going to ask you actually when it comes to like how far back can you go in the injury to heal it? And I think you guys were talking about how there was a couple maybe like 16 years of marriage or something and you sat with them and they ended up bringing up a conflict that happened at their honeymoon.
That's right.
Right.
This couple was very, very, very conservative in their religious belief system. Okay. And it was a heterosexual couple and their beliefs were that the woman, 1, should be virgin, 2, shouldn't even make out, 3, could only be kissed on the cheek by the prospective husband-to-be. My God. So this woman had never been married before. The gentleman had been married 3 times, or this was his 3rd marriage. Now, one little problem, the guy was a porn addict. Okay. So he'd been looking at porn since he was 5. there was a neighbor who introduced him to porn. So he had been looking at porn since he was 5 years old. He was now 45. 40 years he'd been looking at porn. And that's how he learned what sex looked like, from porn. What is sex? In porn, totally impersonal, where the person operating the video has total control of everything. All right, so move to their honeymoon night. This is a woman who's only been kissed on the cheek, right? He then mandated that on that honeymoon night she do every single thing he'd seen in the porn movies. She was so traumatized by that, Lisa, as you can imagine, right?
I'm sure kissing for her was like nerve-wracking.
A big deal. So everything, they had every kind of sex. She didn't know what the heck was going on. She was so traumatized by that. And thereafter, he then said, we have to have sex 3 times a week at this particular time, every third day, whatever it was. So by the time I saw them 16 years later, she was so traumatized, she couldn't see straight. And when they had sex, which they still did 3 times a week after 4 children, she'd go up there to the ceiling, look down, not be present in her body, right? As you often hear from abuse victims. So in the therapy, they came in as a couple, terrible relationship. What they needed to do was repair that first honeymoon night of what that was like for her. And he had no idea. He had no idea that to her, it was rape. It was total rape every which way. And thereafter, it was too. So they actually healed from this. They processed it using our method of these 5 steps, then took a moratorium on sex so she could figure out, what the heck does my body want? I have no idea. I haven't really been inside my body having sex for the last 15, 16 years. So we took a moratorium. She read a fabulous book by Lonnie Barbach called For Myself, Female Sexuality, that teaches women that their bodies are beautiful no matter what, and helps them learn what they love sexually and what they maybe don't love. So she went through that whole book, and she kept a journal also of her learning, of her experience that she shared. So by the end of it was about 8 or 9 months, she was finally ready to begin to be physically intimate with him again. And she knew what she wanted and what she didn't want. And they started slowly, because all that trauma could cause her to leave her, really leave her consciousness again. So they started slowly, but eventually had this beautiful sexual relationship. They completely rebuilt it. But they had to recover from that early trauma, and it started on day 1 of marriage.
Wow, what were those 5 things, if you don't mind just laying them out? You're like, I'm glad you asked.
My favorite parts.
Can I say something before you launch into that?
No. Okay, go ahead.
Sometimes it's not as huge as that.
Sure.
I know one couple I had where she was going for a biopsy, a breast biopsy, and she really acted like it was not a big deal, but actually it really was a big deal for her. She was really scared, and he went and played golf with a client, an important client, and he had no idea that she was terrified. But because he wasn't there during the biopsy, she felt like there was an attachment injury. She couldn't trust him to really care about her health. So it can be a smaller incident like that. And, processing it can really be helpful because, as they processed it, she actually said, oh, no, go ahead. It's not a big deal, But she really didn't mean that. She wanted him to really notice that she was terrified. And so they were able to use this method to process that regrettable incident. But it was a wedge really between them that made it impossible for the therapy to be effective unless we processed it.
Yeah, of course.
So talk about the 5 steps.
Okay, so these are they're laid out in a booklet, actually. Number 1, there is a list of feelings. And all those feelings, we've tried to think of every feeling you might have during a regrettable incident. And they include things like hurt, angry, sad, afraid, worried, tense, frustrated, everything else. So each person takes a turn saying out loud what they felt during this regrettable incident. And mind you, there's a couple of assumptions I should begin with. 1, always there are 2 points of view in every regrettable incident. They're both right. Okay. Secondly, you've got to be calm to do this. You can't do it just 10 minutes after a big blow up. You've got to be calm. Okay. So they listen to their partner reading off the list whatever feelings that partner had during the fight. 2, they each narrate their point of view about what happened while the other person listens. And the listener, what we found is really helpful, the listener takes notes, writes down notes, because that keeps them from getting defensive, getting flooded, as they're hearing their partner's point of view about what happened. But the partner has to not blame, not criticize, not express contempt, not say, you did this mean thing to me. There's the you again. Instead, the speaker needs to describe, I saw this look on your face. I imagined you were really angry at me. I watched you walk into the living room. I heard you say. So it's all about the speaker's perception of what happened. I heard, I saw, I thought, I fantasized, right? I said, I remember you saying. Now, their perceptions could be night and day, right? Okay, so the speaker presents their point of view, then the listener, using their notes, summarizes what they heard the speaker say. They don't bring up their own point of view, not yet. Instead, they summarize what they heard the speaker say, make sure they got it right, and then say a few words of validation, like, oh, I can see how you would have felt that way. That makes sense to me. That's all validation is. It's not agreement. It doesn't mean, oh, I see it the same way. It means if I were you, in your shoes, I could see how you felt that way. Then they reverse roles. That's step 2. The other person speaks, and they repeat the process. Third step is looking at triggers. Triggers are crucial, right? All of us have baggage, from old relationships or from childhood. So if any feeling got triggered for you that is an old feeling that started long before this relationship, you share that with your partner, what the feeling was and where it may have gotten started before this current relationship. And those feelings tend to be things like feeling judged, abandoned, rejected, put down, criticized, insulted, etc. You share with your partner if anything got triggered and where it may have started before this relationship. They each do that. Fourth, they're finally taking responsibility. They say something about what their mental state was when this thing happened, and then specifically what they regret saying or doing during this incident, and they apologize for it. Now, important note, look at how late you're apologizing. You're not apologizing right after the incident. Oh, I'm sorry, forget about it. No, because when you do that, you don't know what you're apologizing for. You haven't heard the impact of the other person's actions So what are you apologizing for? What's
Is that
happening?
why you say the apology? Like sometimes if you apologize too quickly, it's one of the biggest mistakes you can make in a relationship.
You bet. It doesn't work. Completely fails. And then you blame the other person for not accepting your apology. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, you apologize at that point. Specifically, I'm sorry that I said these words. I could see where they were critical of you. I'm sorry that I walked out of the room instead of really listening to you, and so on. You apologize. And then the other person does the same thing. And then the last step, step 5, is what is one thing your partner can do differently and one thing you yourself can do differently to avoid this from happening again. So it's kind of comes complete circle. How can we avoid this from happening? How can we make it better?
And be, I assume in that
done.
sense, like extremely actionable. Like if don't say this, act like this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Say this instead. Say
my
that
God.
instead.
Dr. J, that was like a master freaking class. That was amazing. People are going to rewind that over and over and over and over and over again because that was so beautifully laid out and articulated point by point on how to actually get to the resolve versus sweeping it under the rug, pretending it doesn't happen, saying it's not a problem, or
That's right.
like all the other things.
It's really helpful to have a blueprint of
yeah.
what to do.
That's right.
Have those feelings laid out so you don't have to think of them, because you may have trouble, And
the great thing, Lisa, is that John and I have done this so many times because we've had so many regrettable incidents. We now have it memorized. We can do it without the booklet.
That's right.
But the booklet is great, right?
Yeah.
Just in case.
Isn't it even a sign that if you don't have the conflict, it's actually a sign of an unhealthy relationship?
Well, it's interesting because what we discovered in the lab was that those conflict avoiding couples, who really minimize conflict and agree to disagree, don't use persuasion, compromise, they can be fine. There's nothing wrong with conflict avoidance. There's nothing wrong with volatile couples who are much different. They begin with persuasion, and love to fight and argue and debate. And the couples in between, the validating couples, they're all fine as long as they meet that 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. So conflict avoidance can be very, very functional in a relationship. And it used to be before we did the research that people thought there was only one way to do conflict, but just not true.
Yeah.
Right.
So what other myths, because you guys have been at this for a long time and you've got the Gottman Institute, your studies are insane. So you must hear so much, if I'm going to be honest, crap out there where you're like, I can't believe people are actually believing this. What are a couple others that you're just like, this is very misleading and it's actually dangerous to couples instead of helping them?
Dangerous. Well, I don't know if it's dangerous, but one is that you have to be compatible with your partner. Compatible meaning having the same values, the same beliefs, the same interests, the same fun activities you prefer, the same home life preferences, etc. Absolutely myth. And all of the dating sites are based on that compatibility myth, which is why actually they don't work. They don't work any better than meeting somebody out in whatever.
They're actually worse than random assignment.
Yeah, right.
Really?
Yeah. When you're
That's right.
randomly assigned to somebody at a dating website, you tend to like 22% of the people you meet. When you're matched, almost zero.
Why is
Almost
that
zero.
then?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Well, this guy wrote a book called Dataclysm, which is about the OkCupid website. He was the numbers guy.
Oh.
And he said they had to do 50,000 matches to get a couple that really liked each other.
50,000
matches. Because they're looking for similarity. And we're not attracted to people who are like us. We're actually attracted to people who are very different from us. And then the mistake that people make is to try to convert their partner into them.
Yeah.
Rather than
Clone.
accepting the differences and really being enriched by the differences.
Yeah. There was a guy named Klaus Wedekind, and he did a famous study called the T-shirt study, in which he had men, a group of men, wear a T-shirt for 2 days. And then he presented the T-shirts to a group of women. And he also looked at the kind of the blood work of the men and the women.
And the women, right.
And, especially looking at the histocompatibility complex, which looks at the parts of the blood that protect you from illness or disease. Okay, so he found that the women preferred T-shirts of men that had a very different histocompatibility complex than they did. Not only that, but when they actually met the men, they liked them better. Isn't that interesting? So if you think about it, you got to know a little bit of biology here, but with genetics, we want our genetic pool for our child to be as broad as possible, as expansive and differentiated as possible, rather than more narrow, because a broader genetic pool given to that child will protect them more from more illnesses, more viruses.
Diversity makes biological sense.
It makes complete sense.
Part of evolution. So we're actually, due to evolution, attracted to people different from us. And John and I are as different as can be. We're totally different.
Me and my husband, the same. It's just like our cultures, everything, like we're completely different. And I'd always heard, like they say, like, I'll find someone that likes the things you like. But there's so much complexity to, well, there is a bit of a hurdle when you meet someone that isn't like you, right? So it's like, he listened to what I call screaming music. It's like rock music. I came from R&B and rap. So it's like, you kind of have to like get used to the music thing, right? But it makes complete sense biological, because if me and my husband had a child, that child would be better off because of the diversity of both of us.
That's exactly right.
I want to go back to something actually that we were talking about. So as we were talking about kind of like resentment and whether it's infidelity or just like conflict that's built up. I've heard you guys talk about something called a negative sentiment override.
Right.
I think it's all too common. Do you mind explaining what that is and the dangers of it?
Yeah, the idea came from a guy named Bob Weiss at the University of Oregon. He's a very wise scientist. And what he said was, I have noticed that generally couples are in one of two states of mind. Either they kind of think that the relationship is much better than costly, or they think it's more costly than good, right? When you do your cost-benefit analysis of the relationship and your partner's character, you either come out on one side or the other. There's no in between. And research that he did and subsequent research that several of us have done in our labs confirm his hypothesis. So he called that state where you're really thinking, basically this relationship sucks. Negative sentiment override. So your negative sentiment overrides positive stuff that can happen.
And sentiment means feelings, negative feelings.
So your overall sentiment overrides the positivity. Or you can be in a state where your overall sentiment overrides negativity. So, like I had this one client where the guy said, when my wife comes down in the morning, I take a look at her face. If there's anything negative on her face, I'm out the door, because I've had it up to here with her negativity. Right?
Like that's not negative, right?
Right. So, that was him, he sees negativity when it's not there. Even if his wife, has had a bad night's sleep, he takes it personally, right? That's negative sentiment override. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's always walking around expecting some argument's going to come out of nowhere. If you're in positive sentiment override, when your wife comes down and your husband comes down in a bad mood or grumpy, you think, oh, I wonder what's wrong. Maybe you didn't sleep well. Maybe she didn't sleep well. Maybe something's on her mind, something's stressing her out. I should ask about it. You don't take it personally, right? And if it is personal, then you go, oh, I really better pay attention, right? That's positive sentiment override. But the question is, how do people get to one of those two states? And that's where we thought they get there because the friendship is not working. And we were wrong. Yes, they do get there because the friendship is not working, but also they get there if conflict's not working.
Right.
You can slide into that negative sentiment override. And once you're in that state, it's really hard for your partner to dig out. Because whatever your partner does to repair, you think, oh, what's the ulterior motive? You know, you don't trust your partner's intentions.
Yeah. And when you say conflict doesn't work, do you mean you haven't been able to resolve the conflict? So you go...
No, not necessarily that. It's more that the way you manage conflict is terrible. Mm-hmm. So the 4 horsemen are there, right? The criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Things get escalated. There may be shouting, yelling, or not. There may be just, not talking, but really needing to talk and not talking.
That absence of positivity.
Yeah.
The other group. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So either one of those can put you into negative sentiment override. And it's hard to dig out of it once you're in it. You have to go back and repair the friendship and intimacy, or change the way conflict occurs in the relationship, is managed in the relationship.
Right.
I'd actually love to talk about your 7 principles of love as you talk about like intimacy and friendship, like all of these things. Do you mind if I go through them?
Sure, yeah.
Okay,
Great.
I'd love to.
What a great idea.
The first one is share love maps.
Yes. Love maps means how well do you know your partner's inner world? How well do you know your partner's priorities, their needs, their values, their most embarrassing moment in childhood, how they feel about their parents, how they feel about the child you have, etc. And the way you build love maps, it's interesting. Most people know how to do this, but they forget to do it. You ask your partner open-ended questions, which means questions that have long answers. They're not yes, no, my favorite color is blue. They're not one-word answers. They're questions like, so what characteristics of your family would you like to be passed down to our child? Or are you thinking about changing our house? Remodeling it in some way? And what ideas are you having about that? They're big, big questions. John and I go on an annual honeymoon every year. It's so fabulous. So when our daughter was 8 and she went to camp, we decided, we're free. We should go to camp. So we did. We went to this fabulous B&B up in British Columbia. And for the last, 23 years?
Right.
24 years, we've been going to exactly the same B&B every year, staying in exactly the same room. And every year, we ask each other these big, open-ended questions. What did you hate about last year? What really sucked? What did you love about last year? And what do you want the next year to be like? And we talk about those for 2 weeks, and then we go home. So, that is...
And have a better year.
And have a better year. And know each other better. Because you don't just ask really deeper questions once. People are evolving over time, right? We're all changing throughout the years of our lives. So you have to keep updating your love map. In other words, the map of your partner's internal landscape by asking those kinds of questions.
So
That's
good.
building love maps.
I love that. Okay, we'll go to the second one. Nurture your fondness and admiration.
Yeah, so that's
my
really
favorite.
about feeling respected and loved by your partner.
And that being expressed.
Right. It has to come out of your mouth.
Or fingers.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, how well are you doing? How is your relationship doing? What do you admire about your partner? What are you proud of? What do you really think is cool about your partner? And are you expressing that? Communicating that respect. Are you communicating affection? Is it getting through? Does your partner feel good about the way you're loving? And this is kind of where people think of the love languages, but there's more than 5. There's really hundreds that people have in the way they make bids for connection, which is our next level of friendship. Love maps, fondness and admiration, love and respect. And then the third level, which is turning toward those everyday bids and needs that your partner is expressing, and building that emotional bank account by turning toward that bird test. Very small moments make a really big difference.
They do. And also another really important part of turning towards is look for what your partner is doing right and say thank you. Say thank you. John makes the best coffee in the universe every single morning, and he has for like 37 years. So I say thank you every single day until he's like dying of boredom. But I say it anyway because I mean it.
I know how she likes her coffee.
Yeah.
And was
I'm
that something
grateful.
you specifically had said to him? Like, it would be meaningful to me to make me coffee every morning? Or
Did
was
I
it,
ask him for that?
yeah,
you
like,
mean?
yeah, like what was did he just volunteer?
He volunteered one day. But what I know from being a psychologist is that the more you reward a behavior, the more it's likely that behavior will repeat itself. Yippee-i-yo. And so I say, thank you for making the coffee. Make it tomorrow.
Yeah, because me and my husband, we did the whole love language thing, and I'm with him at least. It's like when he does things for me, I feel thought of, and so we sat down. He said, "Well, what is the thing that makes you feel thought of? Because I do things for you and you don't realize, right? Because it's almost like you don't really do things for each other." And so I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay." Do you want me to actually tell you? He goes, yes. Like, how can I make sure that you feel the way that I really want you to feel? So I was like, well, when I wake up in the morning, if the kettle is boiled for me, then I just know that you just boiled the kettle so that when I get up, it's ready, you've thought of me, because he gets up before me. And so he did that until I stopped drinking the hot water, but he did it every single morning to the point where sometimes he'd like, but babe, I was up so early that it went cold again, so I just reboiled it for you. And that one simple act, I had asked him and he reciprocated.
Yay.
And so I was wondering how much of this between you guys are you vocalizing, please do this specific thing, or you're navigating things as you go, and then which one do you particularly advise?
I think it's one of the best questions you can ask your partner is, what can I do this week to make you feel loved? It may change from week to week, and so, may say, I need alone time, this week, or it might be, I need you to really be close to me this week, because I'm feeling stressed, but ask.
Yeah. Sure. That's right.
And so number 4?
Yeah. So it's what John was just explaining just now. Positive sentiment override, which means giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, right? Versus negative sentiment override, reading into everything your partner does and says something negative that you feel impacting you as negative. Even if they say, I love you. You take it as negative. You hear it as criticism. What? You just love me? You don't really, really love me? And that's negative sentiment override. So positive sentiment override versus negative sentiment override.
And how do you, in the moment, catch yourself that you're doing it?
So in the moment, if your partner, let's say, is grouchy in the morning and says, I made this really dumb mistake one time. I killed a microwave by running the microwave when there was nothing in it, using it as a timer. What did I know? I'm a technical idiot. What can I say? So if he was in a grouchy mood and he said, you're not supposed to run the microwave if there's nothing in it. And I feel he's telling me I'm really stupid. He thinks I'm dumb. I'm not worthy. And that really hurts me. Oh, wait a minute. He didn't get any sleep last, so that was negative, right? Negative sentiment override versus, oh yeah, I heard him getting up at 3 a.m, and I don't think he came back to bed. He didn't get very much sleep. No wonder he's grouchy. I'll take that in, but just not take it so personally. That's positive sentiment override.
Yeah, I think sometimes you end up getting in that loop,
Yeah.
and you said it before, you just make it about yourself. And it's like, what have I done wrong? I was in a
That's
bad
right.
mood with
Why
me.
is he angry with me? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
And so sometimes me and my husband even have language where it's like, what did you hear me say?
Good. That's great.
Because I'm like, well, I heard you
It's a
say
great
this.
question.
And he's like,
Yep.
I didn't say that. Actually, what I said is this. And I'm like, but it's the same word. And he's like, actually, babe, it's not the same word. And so then we'll have the talk about the word that we used and my interpretation of the word versus his interpretation of the word.
Right. And they'll be totally different. That's right. Especially if you come from two different cultures. Huge.
Yeah.
I remember one time I went into Julie's office and I said, do you want to get some coffee? Go to Starbucks and get some coffee. And she said, are you here? And I said, yeah, I'm here. And do you want to get some coffee? And she said, yeah, but are you here? And I was starting to get angry. You know, what's she talking about? Am I here?
Yeah.
You know, and I said, what do you mean by this, by your question? She said, well, do you just have a few minutes or do you have some time so we can actually talk about things? Oh, I had no idea what she meant by are you here?
Yeah. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Speak English.
I'm here. I'm asking to go to coffee.
Read my mind, honey.
Read my
Just
mind.
Read
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
mind.
exactly. That's
Another myth.
Yes.
Right. No, mind reading, it doesn't work.
If they love me, they should know.
Never.
That is like, honestly, I think that is
Yes.
very detrimental to a lot of
It
relationships.
is.
Yeah.
It really is, Lisa. You're right.
Okay, so let's go to number 5.
Okay. So number 5 is manage conflict, right?
Yeah.
Manage conflict.
Fight
And
right, like your book.
there it is. And so, you know, you try and avoid the 4 horsemen, you repair regrettable incidents, you accept influence from each other. That's where accepting influence comes in. You ask for what you need in a way that's not critical, not blaming. And it ties in to number 6, which is honoring each other's dreams. And remember earlier, we were talking about those dreams underlying your position on an issue, oftentimes when you're just arguing on the surface. And in particular, you know, one thing we haven't mentioned yet, but is really important for people to know, is that 69% of problems couples struggle with are perpetual issues. They never go away. They never get resolved.
69%.
69%. And they're based on personality differences and differences in lifestyle preferences, right? So you have to be able to dialogue about those. And a lot of times those dialogues have to do with understanding each other's underlying position.
Yeah.
And why you hold that position so dear to you regarding those perpetual issues, right? That don't go away.
How many of us like almost just don't do the work and then do it when it's too late versus like I'm just, as you were talking, I was thinking if everybody did like the masterclass that has been today before they actually got together with somebody or like on the first date, obviously that's a lot of commitment on the first date, but you see where I'm going? It's like if you are able to talk through all these, the dreams, like if that's the 69% is insane. If you just establish character and what was the other thing you said? Personality and
Lifestyle
lifestyle.
preference.
Thank you. If you address those at the beginning,
That's why we wrote that 8 dates book. You know, that people can go on those dates when they're courting and have those conversations and see whether, you know, they actually are enriched by one another, enriched by the differences that they discover.
Right.
I mean, when you guys first came here, I was like, do we have 4 hours or 5 hours? Because there's so much stuff that you guys cover that I think that if people are able to do the work in themselves before they even get started, then when they start the relationship, they do the work together.
Right.
So that things like, you know, when you get 5, 10, 15 years down the road, you're not having to unwire all of these like moments that maybe you can't get past, like the gridlock, where you realize, oh, your dreams don't even match. And now you're 10 years into the relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
But dreams don't have to match.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yes, you're right.
Honor each other's
yes.
dreams. And because you're incompatible, those dreams are not going to match.
But sometimes,
Typically.
the not match in the dreams is a deal breaker. You know, like one person wants children and the other person doesn't.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's exactly what I actually said to when people say, oh my God, you and your husband are really lucky. And I said, look, another guy or in another relationship, if I had told him, hey, I want 4 children, you get married, and then 8 years later, I'm like, oh, actually, psych, I don't want any, we're going to build a business together. A lot of men may have left their woman for that.
That's
This is
right.
right or wrong. If
That's right.
If you really want children and that's what happens, you should make the decision that's right for you. But my husband didn't leave me. We went through it. We spoke about it all. But it was because maybe one of his dreams wasn't necessarily to be a father. He was like, oh, I'd love to be a father, but it's not a dream of mine. So I
Right.
think that that's how we could also work through it. But you're right, there are moments where you just need to acknowledge whether those dreams can coincide, can do that Venn diagram that you were saying, or actually there's one of you has to give it up. And I
Right.
think if one of you has to give it up, I assume it's a relationship that's not going to be able to succeed. Am I right?
Well, it depends on what the issue is.
The dream itself, let's say.
Well, if it's a major, major, major dream that you cannot compromise on, and it's directly the opposite to your partner's, and your partner cannot compromise, and one cancels out the other, like you can't have half a child, right in the middle, it's not going to happen.
Well, one
have a dog.
partner's dream is the other partner's nightmare.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what though? That's not always true, because let me give you an example
yeah, I'd
of
love
us.
to.
Okay, so I'm a super, super, super lover of nature, of being outdoors, of mountain climbing, of hiking, of backpacking, of all kinds
Adventure.
of stuff. Outdoor. I love dirt. What can I say? And this is the consummate indoorsman. He loves to sit in his red chair and read like 24/7. So you see the incompatibility? There's a little incompatibility. So I had a dream for my 50th birthday of taking 10 women to going to Mount Everest Base Camp and then going higher, see how high. And is that your nightmare, dear?
Yep.
Yes. Meanwhile, my nightmare would be sitting in a red chair for 12 hours before I go to bed and reading about physics or math, higher math. I would I'd go cross-eyed. So,
But I love that.
But he loves it. So it's not my nightmare, but it's definitely not a great dream. So we're opposites, right? But it doesn't have to cancel each other out. He totally supported my dream of doing that trip. And he stayed home for 4 weeks with our daughter and learned how to braid hair. Yay! It was really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when he's reading his physics, I go for, a long walk or a hike or something. And that's fine. And then
You're curious about the physics.
And then I'm
too.
curious, and he tries to explain it, and I go cross-eyed, but that's fine.
But I think it goes back to then your guys' principles, where you really do respect each other's dream and hold space for it.
That's
I've
right.
never seen her so happy as the picture she took at 18,600 feet.
Yes,
And
indeed.
probably in that moment, then you were glad that he loved sitting home with a book because he was taking care of your daughter braiding her hair and you didn't have to worry about it.
Darn tootin'. Not to mention the fact I didn't have to, drag him up to 18,600 feet, which would have killed him. He gets altitude sick on a ladder. It wouldn't have been good.
That is not good. No. So thank you for sharing that example, actually. I think
Sure.
that's a very perfect way of explaining how things can work or not potentially work, because
That's
there's
right.
another scenario where you guys aren't the Gottmans and have done all this research where you have that same scenario and you're just bitter with each other. See, she abandons me, she goes up that mountain, or the other one is like, let's see, he's so boring, he just sits there and reads all day, he doesn't even show any interest.
Exactly. It could have looked like that.
And then the final one.
Final principle.
The seventh is creating shared meaning. Now, shared meaning, is tapping into our belief, John and mine, that every person is a philosopher, no matter what their education, no matter what their IQ, no matter what their background. Every person wants to find some meaning in their life. They want to have a purpose for being on this earth. So creating shared meaning means not necessarily having the same life purpose with your partner. I mean, that's great, but you don't have to. Sharing it means talking about it with each other. So your partner understands that facet of the jewel that you are, along with everything else. They understand that part of you. And the life purpose, the meaning, the weight and importance you're giving to something because it is your life purpose.
And the other two parts of that are, one is supporting the roles you play in life. You know, maybe it's important to you to be a really, you know, caring daughter or a very good friend of your friends. And, you know, does your husband support that? You know, does your husband, you know, really value that? So Julie is really a very good sister to her brothers, you know, and I support that, you know, and I want to be a good brother to my sister, and she supports that. So supporting each other's roles, I support her as a mother and grandmother, and she supports me as a grandfather and father. And then the other part is creating rituals of connection, creating ways of being together where you can count on having your partner's ears, where you can count on your partner being there for you. And those rituals of connection can create a lot of meaning. You know, like, what do formal holidays mean to you? Christmas, Ramadan, New Year's, Passover, Kwanzaa, but then also the informal events, like, what should a weekend be? How do you want to initiate lovemaking? What should lovemaking be like? How do you renew yourself when you're burned out? All these ways that you move through time together that can have a lot of deep meaning.
Move through time, that's lovely. How important is intimacy and sex? Because growing up, I saw a lot of couples that had bed death where they just slept in separate rooms, and it always seemed like it didn't ever sit well with me, but I could never articulate it even when I was younger. But yeah, what do you guys think about bed death and sleeping in separate rooms when people are like, no, we love each other, nothing's wrong, but he snores, and so we just agreed that it's better to sleep in separate rooms?
Well, it turns out that research shows, not our research, but that 15% of all couples 45 years or older actually have no sex and are quite happy with it. 15%. 15%. Really? Yeah.
Can I ask you another question? Do they just masturbate and that's why they're not?
Quite often they've lost interest in sex.
No libido.
Yeah. And usually it's the guy who loses interest first in a heterosexual relationship rather than the woman. You think it'd be the woman. What they want from their partner is companionship, and they seem to, sometimes they're happy with it, sometimes they're unhappy. But 85% of the time, sex stays important. So it's important to really understand, you know, what makes for a great sex life. There's a wonderful study of 70,000 couples in 24 different countries asking this question: what makes for people having a great sex life versus an awful sex life? And what they discovered was that it doesn't have anything to do with what goes on in the bedroom. Great people have a great sex life, say I love you every day and mean it. They give compliments. They give surprise romantic gifts. They're physically affectionate. They cuddle. Only 4% of couples who don't like to cuddle are happy with their sex life.
Wow,
96%. 96% of non-cuddlers are miserable. Cuddling is very important. Having weekly romantic dates and taking romantic vacations together, those are really important. So it's about affection. It's about, you know, fondness and admiration, turning toward, love maps. That's what makes the difference for great sex.
Because I even noticed, like, even just sitting here, like, you rub her arm, you guys are like, you do those moments of touching.
Yeah,
and
we do.
It's interesting how even just as a bystander, when I see that, I automatically go, wow, they're really in love. So all of the principles, everything you guys have taught today, I assume you put that into your own marriage. What's the thing for you guys that you feel like has been, and I know everyone's like, what's the one thing? But if people are listening, this obviously we've spoken about a lot. What's the thing that you're like, if you do nothing else, this is the first place to start in order for people to have a wonderful relationship like you guys have really worked hard at?
So I think we each have a little different answer to that. But one of the things I think that's super important is go home to your partner, sit down with them and say, so what are your fondest dreams right now? What are you dreaming about that isn't fulfilled right now in your life that I can support you with in fulfilling that?
I'm curious on what your answer is, John.
When I first started talking about research findings to the press, I would always get asked that question of what's the one thing that makes the difference, right? Yeah. And I finally decided my answer is that in a great relationship, when your partner's upset, you have the motto that the world stops and you listen. So I carry a notebook in my back pocket at all times. And if Julie's going to say, we need to talk, I take out this notebook and I've got a pen in my front pocket and I say, I'm taking notes. Talk to me. What's on your mind? What's on your heart? Because when I first start doing it, I think, oh, she's upset again. Damn it, And then I write when what she's saying, I think, oh, that's a good point. That's interesting. And, so I calm down as I write and I find out what's on her mind. And I think that's the most important thing you can do in a relationship is to really let your partner know that there's nothing more important than what she's feeling.
Aren't I lucky?
And I have that attitude when I became a father. I thought, if my daughter comes into my study, I am never going to say, go away. I'm never going to say, I'm working on this paper or this grant, leave me alone. I would always put down what I'm doing and turn toward her and communicate to her that she's the most important thing in my life. And when she was 6 years old, I said to her, I have a question. And she said, what? And I said, what's the most important thing to me in life? And she said, me. And I said, you're right.
You got me all choked up there. A father's love towards a daughter can be so special. And I can just imagine how she feels so seen in that moment.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nothing more important to me than her.
Wow. That really got me all choked up. I'm very close with my dad, but I grew up with a father that was very busy. Oh. He was very busy. But I always felt loved by him. Yeah. So when I was with him, I always felt seen. And to think about that moment where he was so busy, and I told you guys before we were rolling how my parents were divorced. But every weekend, no matter how busy my dad was, he took the weekend, he took his kids, he cooked for us, he took us horse riding and rowboating. And even though I didn't see him all the time, that moment of anytime I went up to my dad on the weekend and I needed him, he always was there. And how that can impact then, especially with female, their belief in relationships and what a man is when you grow up. Like what you just did to your daughter is exactly the thing that she's going to take into her future relationship.
She's an amazing mother.
She has the most incredible marriage. Beautiful, beautiful, loving, supportive, super close.
She's a great mom too.
Marriage where they're really supportive of each other.
And then just to add one more thing with the notebook, as you were showing it, I was like, oh, it's really smart because it does two things. Number one, it immediately signals to you he's ready to listen. Like he's heard you, he's stopped, he's open because he's physically pulled the book out, right?
I'm important to him.
Yes, but it's not like he got his phone. There's something very powerful about this little written notebook that is just for you that immediately signals to you you're important. It also, John, in your position, I can imagine it kind of forces you to stop, forces you to really listen. Because when you have to write something down, you can't just passively go, You actually have to stop and actually hear what she's saying. So
yeah, because mostly I feel like I'm an innocent victim, and and she's picking on me for no good reason.
See this yarmulke up here? This is a halo.
It's a halo God gave me. I'm always innocent. So when I take the book out, my big invention, and I start writing down what she's saying, it always makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, see, it
really
keeps him
does.
calm.
Yeah.
You don't get flooded. You don't
I
get
don't get flooded.
defensive because it takes a little, cerebral activity here to write stuff down. Keeps you out of that being flooded.
And the flooded, by the way, is such a powerful word. You guys use it a lot. And I used it today with my husband. Well, in the sense of I told him, I was like, babe, the Gottmans have a great phrase, because I keep saying like, I just need to go away. I just like, I get flustered, but I don't know what words to use in that moment. And I always know it's better for me to step away than for me to just stay in that moment.
Right.
And I'm always trying to find the word. And I'm like, I just can't talk right now. I just need to walk away. And so I told him today, I was like, from now on, babe, I'm going to use the word flooded. But what you also say in your book is don't tell the person, hey, you're flooded right now. And that's exactly what I told him. It's like, but you can't tell me I'm flooded. What was the phrase you said? You have to say to them, maybe it's time to take a break.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing about taking a break, there's a couple of rules about it that are super important. One is that before you split, after you've said, I need to take a break or whatever, say when you'll come back to continue the conversation. That's really good. And also, when you go into separate space, don't think about the fight. Don't think about what you were talking about, because you'll stay flooded if you do that. Instead, do something self-soothing, like doing some yoga or meditation or going for a run or reading a book or listening to music, something that takes your mind off it. So your body has a chance to metabolize those stress hormones out of your system. And then you come back at the designated time and you've had a brain transplant. You're much calmer.
I love that. And then you even say, even if you go back and you're still not ready, go back and say, I need more time.
Yes.
Like, it's so good. Your book is so good. It gives such, that's what I need. I know I can get emotional. I know my emotions don't are sometimes just complete goggles that are making me not see something straight. And so I know I can't trust my emotions. Like, I very much say that a lot. Like, I can't trust my emotions right now, because you feel a certain way, but it's your emotions telling you feel it. If you can calm down, you can actually see the truth. And maybe it is, like you said earlier, maybe it's that I'm just tired. Maybe it is that it's a time of the month. Like, what are all the reasons that maybe I feel like this? And then taking that space, in that moment, sometimes I can let my emotions take me away. And so your book gives such tactical things like that. Like, don't just leave. Say, hey, I need to walk away. I need 2 hours. Then after the 2 hours, if you're not feeling great, you go back to them, you say, hey, I still need some more time, but I'm letting you know. What are you doing in that moment then with your partner? Is it you're letting them know that you're not abandoning them, that you're not going to sweep it under the rug?
Exactly. You're not rejecting them. You're not abandoning them. You're not diminishing the importance of what you guys have been talking about. You're going to return to the conversation, which really helps the partner realize that, no, what they've been sharing is important. You value them, you value the conversation, and you will come back.
Before Bob Levinson and I did our research, we asked people, what are we going to find with heart rates? And people invariably said, the couples that are in love, their hearts are going to be beating faster, and the couples who are not in love, they're not interested in one another, they'll have really calm heart rate. And just the opposite was true. People whose hearts were beating faster and who were sweating more and whose blood was flowing faster and who weren't breathing as evenly, their relationships were deteriorating over the next 3 years. So physiological arousal was not a sign of love. It was a sign of bad things going on in the relationship.
Like stress and anxiety and things like that. Wow. But the thing that you guys say that I freaking absolutely love, and it's going back to one of these myths that people always say, never go to bed mad.
Oh, forget it. The actual biblical quote, I believe, the translation is, don't be full of wrath when you go to bed. Well, there's a big difference between wrath, which is really rage, being flooded, and angry. You can go to bed angry. Of course, anger is a decent emotion. It's a good emotion. It tells you that either something is blocking you from reaching a goal, or something feels unfair, unjust. Okay, so you're angry, but it's, 12:30 at night. You're exhausted. It's not a good time to talk. Are you going to just cut off your emotion? Probably not. No. But if you get a good night's rest, you'll be fresh in the morning, and then you can talk about what you're angry about in a way that's much more calm and gentle and constructive.
And I think the quote actually comes from St. Paul from one of his letters, and he wasn't married.
No.
Neither is the Dalai Lama.
Yeah,
so we have to remember all those calm people, forget it.
Yeah.
They're not married.
But the funny thing, I remember when I first got married to my husband, it was like, okay, don't go to bed angry. And it's 2 a.m. and you're exhausted and it's actually just getting worse, not better. So we created a rule that we absolutely can go to bed angry, but we have to do 2 things. We have to kiss each other on the lips, even if you're mad.
Okay.
And you have to say, I love you.
Aw.
Those are the things, because it's reminding you, no matter how mad I am right now, the intimacy of the lips is important to remind each other, and then just reminding each other that even though I'm mad at you, like I'm really mad at you right now, I still love you. So those are the things.
Bruce Willis and Michelle Pfeiffer and the two of us, what they would do is they would entwine their feet when they were sleeping, even if they were angry.
So sweet.
When she pulled away her feet one night, he knew the marriage was in real trouble. So whatever ritual they have for being able to go to bed mad, it's fine.
Well, Dr. Julie, Dr. John Gottman, you guys have been amazing. Where can people find you and the 1,000 books that you've written and all the workshops and you guys have an app? Please tell everybody about it.
You can go to Gottman.com, www.gottman.com, and you'll see all our books and all of our different workshops and teaching and a million different things that you can do. We also have a website that's called Gottman Connect. And Gottman Connect contains, first of all the ways to assess your relationship without needing a therapist. You can do it in the privacy of your own home, which is really wonderful. And some of those methods come straight out of the research lab, so they're very valid and accurate. And secondly, if you do the assessment or you don't, we have all of the interventions for how to make your marriage or relationship stronger, depending on what you want to do, whether you want to build your friendship or learn how to manage conflict better. We have all kinds of modules that you can get on Gottman Connect to do, again, in the privacy of your own apartment, your own home, and that give you the tools you need to really strengthen your relationship.
And very brief videos.
And very teeny-weeny little videos.
Like over 80 videos you guys have?
87 that are hilarious because they all, half of them show how not to do things. And we practice that so much. They're really good.
That's amazing. If you want to learn the secret to a 50-year marriage, keep watching.
Philip and I wanted to be married, and we wanted to be happily married. So why not list what would allow us to be happily married, but also list what would upset us? So we had the conversation like, okay, here's what's going to push my button. So it's imperative that you be vulnerable with each other and say, if you want to know what's going to push my button, here it is. So, okay, he's told me what's going to push his button. Why would I want to do that? I don't want to do that. So that's a very, very sensitive subject, because you tell someone what's going to push your button, then you're giving them ammunition. And if you're with someone who, that's so bad. And see, I love him. I want him happy. Why would I want to push his button? I'm not that person. I want him happy. So he gave me what I could use to push his button. And I've never ever used it. In 49 years, I've never used it. His father was a severe alcoholic as well. And he witnessed and heard his father do things and witnessed his father doing things that he will never forget. And one of his buttons was, don't ever compare me to my father. Don't ever say, oh, you sound just like your father. You are acting just like your father. Now, he loved his father, but he did not appreciate or respect some of the things he did. And so he told me, I'm just asking you never, ever to compare me to my father. in a negative way like that. I have never, ever, ever even thought of doing that.
That's so powerful because I'm sure there are moments, right? You don't have a perfect marriage. I don't think anyone has.
No one's
so there's
perfect.
certain moments where I can imagine you're probably screaming at each other, or you're
We've never raised our voices.
Oh, you've never screamed?
Never.
Oh, that's
We're not that way.
Interesting.
We're not that way. But see, that we're not that way. Oh, I just got chills. We're not that way. But that was another conversation we had. So we can get mad and go, oh, that kind of thing. But if we're heated and we're mad at each other, it's a very calm, like that. Like that. So it's not that we don't get mad at each other.
Right.
Oh, yes, we do. But we don't settle it by screaming and yelling and slamming doors. No, I won't accept that. And he won't either.
Okay, so you're just hitting me with so many great stuff. Like I want to keep breaking this down. Okay, so you don't scream. I love that. Tom and I have never called each other names.
Never.
Ever. That is off the table.
That would break my heart.
Yeah,
that would make me so mad. I would never let him forget it.
Right, and to me that's off the table, right? Going back to the non-negotiables. So establishing, okay, look, we don't scream at each other. Like all of these things are so healthy. And I'm going to go back to, girl, 45 years, it's not an accident. So I'm going to keep taking these nuggets of gold and putting them in my pocket. Okay. But not using their vulnerabilities as a weapon is huge. And you just can't ever take it back. Like,
right.
You can't take it back.
That's right. That's right. And you know what I do? I journal.
Okay.
I can tear him up in a journal.
Okay.
I do. I journal because we're all normal.
Yeah.
We're all, no one's perfect. And I can get really upset with him or frustrated. And I journal. I get all that out because at the end of whatever I'm writing, I go back and start listing everything I absolutely adore about him. Because I do. I absolutely adore him. And could not live without him.
But that's really powerful, right? Saying that you journal. I think I actually it never occurred to me to write out a journal on moments like this. Normally what I do when I'm in a debate or an argument with my husband, I write down all the things that I'm upset about. And then I kind of go back and go, why was I upset about that? Why did that bother me?
Yes, because I will tell you this. I love to go back and read my journaling. I love to do that because I'll think, wow, I can't believe I was that upset, because I will journal until I'm through it. And maybe I'm not completely through it. So I'll journal some more and maybe for a couple of days or whatever. But I love to go back and read it and think, wow, okay, we got through it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about sacrifice. I mean, obviously being with someone for so long, putting other people first, like putting your family first. I get why we do that. I put my husband first a lot. And so in a marriage, in a relationship, in any relationship, I think there are elements of sacrifice. And it seems like the message is somewhat changing now. It's like, you shouldn't have to give up anything for your partner. They need to. But I actually don't think that serves the relationship.
I've always had the belief that I deserve to be just as happy as I'm making my family. I've always had that. Now, Philip has always been very, very good about supporting me taking care of myself. I said earlier something about the fact that being the only woman in the house, raising my boys and being married to a man, was always really very nice, because Philip was very good about teaching our boys, respect women, respect your mother. And so it was a very obvious rule and belief in our home to respect me and all women. So I was raised that way. So that is ingrained in me because I was raised that way, and Philip believes that as well, and I raised boys. So it's just something that I respect myself, and I always have. I respect who I am and what I stand for, and I have always believed that, and I've made sure Philip understood that before we got married.
And that's amazing. But so do you think that that's one of the biggest keys of how you're able to sacrifice without feeling like you're giving things up?
Because it's not really a sacrifice. It's what I was put on this earth to do, and it's what I want to do, to take care of my husband and my boys, but also take care of myself. Now, I will say it was driven home in a big way when my mother died very suddenly at the very young age of 58. And I truly believe it's because she never put herself first. And she took care of all of us and my father and never went to the doctor. And she died suddenly of undiagnosed heart disease. And I know for a fact that had she gone to the doctor just one time, she might still be here. So I really was just convinced that I needed to even step it up even more and put myself first. And that was the basis of my company, Revelation, and my foundation, everything, and my mission to tell women, because I had the platform of the Dr. Phil show. It's not selfish to put yourself first. You have to take care of yourself so you can take care of those you love. And, but I have always believed that, but because I had the ability with the platform of the Dr. Phil show to really put that message out to other women. It was very important to me to do that after losing my mother so suddenly. I was on the phone to her and she said, I feel funny. And I said, what do you mean by funny? And she was already dead. She had died right as the moment she said that. So it's always been my belief in myself, but it's been my mission since I lost her to convince others it's not selfish to put yourself first.
God, yeah, and I mean, your books that you've written have been so impactful. You know, I can't remember which book it was where you said, we find ourselves, you know, rushing our kids to the doctors the second there's something wrong.
Yes.
But I haven't been to the doctor in years.
Yes. Yes. And I think sadly women tend to do that. They are the matriarch of the family. So we do believe our jobs are to take care of our young children and our husbands and our elderly parents. Everyone does look to the matriarch of the family to do that. So we tend to put ourselves last when it comes to our health and to our peace of mind, to relaxation, anything. We tend to put ourselves last. And sadly, I think we pay the price for that. My mother did, I know.
And so in those moments now, like, do you push yourself to remind yourself you need to take care of yourself?
No, I really never have.
That's amazing.
I really never have. I will not, of course, I want my children, raising my boys and my husband, I always wanted to make sure I was doing my job. But if I knew I needed some time to myself, or even daily, I would prepare the meal, I would sit down. But the minute everyone was fed and it was time to just kind of chill, I was up. I said, okay, Philip, they're all yours. I'm going to go soak in the tub, because that was just something I enjoyed doing at the end of the day. Soaking in the tub, lighting a candle, meditating, praying, whatever. But that was my time, and I never hesitated to take it. So that was something simple, but that was my time.
God, I love that so much. I struggled with that for sure. I went all in on being the supportive wife. I was like, I gave up everything that I liked, enjoyed, wanted to do in life. I prided myself on being a great wife. But I only prided myself in that, and that I didn't feel good about myself in any other aspect of my life. And so everything you're saying is incredible. And, you know, it's so beautiful to know that not every woman has to struggle like that,
right.
But also giving the tips of communicating, telling your partner every day. And I even heard you say, if you care about your kids, take care of their mother.
Take care of their mother.
If you care about your husband, take care of their wife. If you care about your parents, take care of their daughter.
That's right. But I really, truly have always believed that. You know, I just have always thought, I will be a better mother. I will be a better wife. I will be a better daughter if I know I've taken some time for myself. And Philip was always really always then and still is, very supportive of me taking girls' trips, or if I would just want to go for the weekend to go see one of my sisters, or having my sisters in, or whatever. He has always been very supportive of that. So as I sit here right now, I think back about when we were first married, and we didn't even have 2 dimes to rub together. If I just wanted to go walk around the block, you know, just get out of the house, or not prepare dinner that night. Like, I don't feel like cooking tonight. Okay. He's always been so supportive of that kind of thing, because I've always been supportive of him.
How important, as you're talking, I'm like, wow, how important do you think it is that you, are as strong as you are. And the reason why I ask is your husband is, I haven't had the pleasure to meet him yet, but larger than life. And I absolutely had a misconception that you were quiet, somewhat docile, followed him. And it is absolutely a flaw in my thinking as a female that is what is needed with a strong man. And
no,
it's almost the opposite.
I believe it is the opposite.
And I think it is, though, that because you're so strong-minded, that is an element that actually really works. Yes. And same with my husband. I mean, he is such a force. I say, you know, I could easily get swept away by his giant wave. Yeah. I really could. Yeah. And I have in the past for 8 years. And I realized that wasn't healthy. That wasn't healthy for me, and that wasn't healthy for our relationship. So I started putting firm lines down, boundaries, demanding selfish time. And he was always beautiful about it. He was like, of course, like, why wouldn't you? But I didn't ask it of myself. Yeah. And then once I started doing that, it actually helped our relationship, because I was able to think about what was important to me. And that's really why I wanted to bring it up, is that he seems like such a strong man, and you could have got swept away. Yes. So when I go, how did you not? It really, in this discussion, is really unraveling itself, because you are very firm in your beliefs.
Yes. You know, I was raised, again, the youngest of 5 children, but being a twin played a big part, because I was brought into this world thinking I needed to take care of him because I was born 5 minutes before him. But we shared that womb, and I think that makes a big difference on personalities. And it shaped my personality. So I feel like I've been like a strong woman my whole life, because I had someone I had to take care of. Plus, we were the youngest of 5 children. And while we were always spoiled and taken care of by our sisters and our parents and everything, I had this strong personality that I always felt loved. I always felt loved and adored. And I can remember going into my relationship with Philip saying, with a personality such like, now listen, you have to love and adore me and think I'm cute, or I won't be happy.
Did you really say that to him? I love that.
Because my father and I've been loved and adored my whole life. So jokingly would say that to him, but that's kind of how I presented myself. Like, okay, so now here's how it's going to be.
Got it. So that's amazing. I want to give you one extra little thing that you missed out that I think is so powerful that you do, is that you chose. So a lot of people look at their childhood and say, I'm this way because of that, in a negative sense.
Yeah, no.
And everything that you've said, you had a choice. You had a choice to look at your father and find someone that's an alcoholic, but you didn't. You had a choice. And look, while a lot of us have struggled, and that's such an important part that you have chosen. And there's one thing, a perfect example that I heard you say, and I was like, this is how other people would get divorced over this very thing. You were just like, whatever. So I believe your mother had just passed away, and you wrote so many heartfelt letters, responses to people who'd reached out saying, I'm so sorry about your mom. You wrote, in fact, why don't you tell us the story?
Oh, yes. I'll start with the fact that we bought an old home. It was an old home. We built a home, and brand new home. We were living in it, and someone wanted to buy it, and just overnight we decided to sell this home and buy this old house, because I wanted to remodel it. So we had to move in the middle of the night. We moved overnight, and it started raining. Oh, and it rained and rained. And so we got into this old house. Everything we owned was wet. The boxes were wet, everything. And so my mother came over, and she said, okay, I'm gonna help you unpack, but I'm gonna run home and bake you a pumpkin pie. And because she was an amazing cook, she could bake and everything. And I loved pumpkin pie. So she said, okay. I said, okay. So she went home to bake me that pumpkin pie. And then when she called and she said, sweetheart, and I went, oh, is my pie ready? She goes, I just took it out of the oven. But she said, is Phil there? And I said, no, he ran to the grocery store. And she said, oh, I wanted to ask him something because I feel funny. And that's when I said, what do you mean by funny? And she passed. So it was so sudden. And we had this outpouring of love, and all these friends came over, and here we are in this old empty house, damp house and everything. It was just a horrible time. And everyone just rallied around and helped and everything. So I sat in this old, nasty dining room, musty smelling dining room, because I thought it's very, very important to me to write these thank you notes, because it was just a bad, bad time.
It's like part of your therapy, right?
It was part of my therapy, yes. So I sat there and I wrote hundreds of notes for 2 days at least, and cried my eyes out with every one of them. But yeah, it was so cathartic. And I got them all written. And so every morning when Philip would leave for work, he would pack this little, and I would do it for him too, but he would pack this little tennis bag, because he would stop on the way home and play tennis, indoor tennis. And so I put all these notes in 2 big Ziploc baggies. And I said, can you take these to the office with you and put them in the mail? He said, sure. So I unzipped the side of his little tennis bag and I put them all down in there. And he said, okay. And I said, great. And it was just like, oh, I got that done. Now I can focus on unpacking the house, all these boxes. And it was like 6 weeks later, and I was going to pack the tennis bag for him. And I reached down in there and I went, and I felt those notes in the side of that bag. And he walked in the room just about the time I put my hand, and he heard me touch that baggie, those Ziploc baggies full. And I went, oh, and my eyes got so big and I just froze. And he went, oh no, because he took that bag to the office that day and he never thought another thing about it. And he used that bag every day, and he never even knew they were in there. He completely forgot about them. 6 weeks later, I'm standing there and went, oh my God, you didn't mail the notes. And he went, oh my, I'm so sorry. And I went, I thought they knew. All this time, I thought they knew. I've seen some of these people. I thought they knew. I thought they knew how I felt. And that's all I could say. I could cry right now. That's all I could say. I just kept thinking, I thought they knew. I thought they knew. And he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I went, and then just something, the sound of his voice, the sadness in his eyes. Oh, it broke my heart. I could cry right now. It broke my heart. I went, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. And he went, no, it's not okay. It's not okay. I'm going to drive to everyone's house today and hand deliver it. And I'm going to tell them how much it meant to you to write to them. And it's my fault. And I'm going to tell them when you wrote him. And I'm going to tell them how it's my fault they didn't get it. And all this time you knew. I said, no, you don't have to do that. Just put them in the mail. And so then I'm like saying, no. No, I can't. I have to do it. And I had to just beg him to not feel bad.
In that moment, like as I heard you tell the story, I was like, these are the moments. These are the moments where how you responded is exactly why you guys are 45 years in marriage. Because contempt is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, in my opinion, right? It's like you can easily get contempt in a relationship, and you hold on to that. And a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you are at each other's throats. You're not seeing eye to eye.
You never mailed those notes. I could do that, but
and you throw out. You never mailed those notes, and you would have every right to. Right? People would be like, "Yeah, he didn't mail those notes."
No, I saw it. I saw the heartbreak in his eyes, and I heard it in his voice. And I knew he didn't do it on purpose.
And so was that it? Like I just told myself, I know who, because that's the big part of it, right? Reminding yourself of who they are, what their intentions are, and not just the intention, but how they act after. He didn't dismiss it. So in that moment, that's a beautiful story. And that's why I want to bring it up, because I really do think it's those moments, it's those freaking moments that can splinter a 5-year relationship, let alone a 45-year relationship. Yes. So have you had to actively work through forgiveness together on certain things? And what does that look like?
Yes. There's a quote that I think is so powerful, that I think really helps define who I am and who we are. I never knew how strong I was until I chose to forgive someone who wasn't sorry and accept an apology that was never given. Because there are a lot of people out there that won't say I'm sorry and won't apologize. But we do. Philip and I do that. And I know when he says he's sorry, I know he means it. And he won't hesitate to apologize, and I won't either. And that was just one of the conversations that we had early on. Like, Philip, here's what will break my heart. And you need to know it. Here's what will break my heart. So don't ever call me a name. Don't ever be so mean to call me in, because I'll never get over it. It'll break my heart. I'm so vulnerable to say, here's what'll break my heart. Because he's like, oh, I don't want to ever break your heart.
It's funny because I know what breaks my husband's heart. And what breaks his heart is me being upset. And so sometimes if we're in a debate or an argument and I feel like I want to cry, I walk away. And he's always like, why are you walking away? And I'm like, because right now I need almost to cry, but I don't want this to influence the discussion, because I don't want you to apologize and say you're sorry if you're not, because just saying you're sorry doesn't help you actually address the issue. So I think we also need to address the issue. But I know you, and I know that if you see me cry, I'm going to break your heart, you're going to feel bad, and now we wouldn't have resolved the problem.
The conversation's over, yes.
Is that also why I've heard you guys say, and again, we do this too, but like you guys say, divorce isn't an option. Like you just take that off the table.
Yes. We said that early on as well. Because I said, we're not just going to be married, we're going to be happily married. So we're going to do what it takes to stay happily married. He goes, that's right. That's exactly right. And Philip did something that I think every couple should do. And he did it because when my mother died so suddenly, it rocked my world, really, because she was the first person I had ever lost. And so death was a reality. It was like, whoa, she's not coming back. She's not coming back. And it broke his heart to see me so upset, of course. And so I was sitting in our bedroom on the bed one day and just adjusting to everything that had happened. And it had been, it had been about 6 months. And I just had this one, I was just having a day where I just really missed her. And he came in and he was looking for me. He came in and I was just sitting there and he goes, are you okay? And I said, oh yeah, I'm okay. I just had one of these moments where the finality of death is just overwhelming. I said, she's really not coming back. And I knew that, but I said, I was just having one of those moments. And he said, I know it's tough when you lose someone for the first time. And I said, yeah. I said, and he said, I want you to look me in the eye and hear me. He said, you need to know that there's nothing you can do ever. There's nothing you can say, nothing you can do that would make me ever leave you. And he said, not that maybe you're wondering, but he said, but I want you to know and hear me, look me in the eye. He said, I will never leave you. I'm never going to leave you. And he finally said it like 10, 15 times because it was important to him. He knew I didn't really need to hear it because I'd never really thought it or wondered it. But I guess he thought, and maybe I would at some point, maybe there would be something that would happen. But he just thought, I just want you to know this.
So where was the original conversation? Because you even just said, I know that we always say divorce isn't an option. So had you had an initial conversation about that?
That was one of our conversations before we got married. When we get married, it's forever. Yes. And it's forever happily married. So that was part of that conversation. It's forever. Divorce is off the table. We're never going to get it.
I love that.
We're going to work at this and we're going to make it last forever. So we had that conversation. Divorce is never an option. We're never going to talk. And we made it so clear that we're not throwing divorce out there and we're upset with each other or we're in a conversation about, well, you always do this or you always do that, whatever. So as a threat, we don't get to threaten each other with the divorce word.
That is so important. Like Tom and I had that conversation early on as well. I actually did say, we're never getting divorced unless you hit me or cheat on me. Those were my two things.
Well, we had the deal breaker list.
The asterisks, yeah.
There's a deal breaker list. That divorce is on that list.
Yes, but apart from that, we actually call it the D word, like Voldemort
Yes.
in Harry Potter,
Yes.
like that thou who shall not
Yes.
be named.
Yes.
We use that with divorce.
Yeah.
Because there has to be that reassurance that no matter, like, there are days where I'm emotional, there are days that I've, like, acted in a way, it's like, oh, I can't believe I acted like that,
Yes.
and you just want to know that they're not going to take the first opportunity they can to back out.
Yes.
And again,
Yes.
the threat, if you live in that fear, now you can't be honest. You can't say what you really think.
Yes.
You can't have the hard talks
Yes.
because, are they going to leave me if I have the hard talk?
Yes. So we had made it clear that the D word could never be used ever. Like, I think I'm just going to tell him. I know we said this, but I think we should get a divorce. And you know how people use that for drama.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But we don't do that. We've never done that.
Yeah.
So he made it clear, I'm never leaving you. So I don't ever think that. But here's the payoff for having so many conversations and working really hard. The payoff is what the phase of life that we're in right now. And I call it the dessert phase of our life. We've raised our boys and we get to see what we've accomplished. We get to see our hard work in our children, bringing our children into the world, raising them. They both are happy. We have, our lives now to live with each other, and we have such payoffs to celebrate.
To learn the signs he doesn't love you, even if you think he does, click here right now.
I am sick and tired of hearing people saying, well, these are the things you did, and that's why your man cheated on you. F you. Absolutely not. Somebody cheats on you, they